Darkness hidden inside Marvel movies. Wanda Maximoff. Let's talk about how Wanda Maximoff is basically a walking tragedy wrapped in a red coat. Everyone loves to focus on her cool powers and dramatic entrances, but underneath all that chaos magic is a woman who's experienced more trauma than a dozen therapy sessions could unpack. She watched her parents die from a Stark Industries weapon, got experimented on by Hydra, watched her brother Pietro get riddled with bullets, accidentally killed an entire building of people in Lagos, and then had to destroy the love of her life, only to watch him die again 5 seconds later. And that's just the highlights reel. But here's where it gets really dark. In WandaVision, we see her cope with all this grief by literally enslaving an entire town of people. She's forcing them to play characters in her sitcom fantasy while they're screaming inside their own minds, unable to even cry for help when she's not looking. Vision might call it excruciating, but that feels like an understatement. Parents are separated from their children, people are frozen in place for days, and one woman literally begs Wanda to let her daughter remember her. Marvel really said, what if we made the hero do something absolutely horrifying, and then tried to make us sympathize with her anyway? And honestly, it kind of worked, which is disturbing in its own right. Bucky Barnes. The Winter Soldier isn't just a cool assassin with a metal arm. He's a prisoner of war who was captured, tortured, brainwashed, and turned into a weapon for 70 years. Think about that timeline. Bucky fell from a train in 1945 and didn't get his mind back until 2016. That's 7 decades of having zero control over your own body while being forced to murder hundreds of people. Hydra would freeze him between missions like he was a meal prep, which is somehow both the most efficient and most disturbing thing they could have done. The movies gloss over this pretty quickly because we need to get to the next action sequence. But Bucky is essentially a victim of human trafficking and extreme psychological torture. He has the most detailed PTSD of any Marvel character, and the therapy scenes in Falcon and the Winter Soldier barely scratch the surface. This man has a list of amends longer than a CVS receipt, and he's supposed to just integrate back into society like he wasn't a brainwashed assassin for longer than most of us have been alive. The scene where he admits he wasn't just following orders in Madripoor, but that he actually remembered enjoying the violence? That's the most honest and disturbing moment in the entire series. Peter Quill. Star-Lord has the funniest origin story if you ignore the part where it's absolutely horrifying. An 8-year-old boy watches his mother die of cancer, runs outside crying, and immediately gets abducted by aliens. Already traumatic enough, right? But then we find out in Guardians 2 that his dad, Ego, literally gave his mom the cancer that killed her. Peter's father looked at the woman he supposedly loved, decided his celestial plans were more important, and planted a tumor in her brain. That's premeditated murder with extra steps. And let's not forget that Ego reveals he's killed thousands of his own children when they didn't have powers. Just casually mentions disposing of countless offspring like he's talking about failed science experiments. The movie shows us a pile of bones, and we're supposed to just move past that for a cool action sequence and some daddy issues resolution. Peter shoots his own father while that father is mid-monologue about how they could have been gods together, which is objectively metal, but also means Peter has now watched both his parents die directly in front of him. Someone get this man actual therapy instead of just a mixtape. Tony Stark. Everyone knows Tony Stark is a genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist, but let's talk about how he's also a walking panic attack with a god complex. After the first Avengers movie, Tony develops such severe PTSD that he can't sleep and starts having panic attacks at the mere mention of New York. His solution? Build dozens of Iron Man suits and obsess over protecting the world from threats he can't control. Healthy coping mechanism? Absolutely not. But here's what makes it darker. Tony creates Ultron, an AI that immediately decides humanity needs to be extinct, which leads to the destruction of an entire country. Sokovia gets lifted into the sky and then dropped, killing thousands of people. Tony's response to this is to support government oversight of the Avengers, which sounds reasonable until you remember this is the same guy who refused to hand over his suits to the government before. The guilt is eating him alive, but instead of processing it, he projects it onto everyone else. Then in Endgame, he gets a daughter, finds happiness, and the universe immediately punishes him for it by making him sacrifice himself. Marvel really said, give this man a happy ending, then rip it away, and thought that was a satisfying conclusion. Thanos. The Mad Titan thinks he's a hero, which is somehow more disturbing than if he was just evil for fun. Thanos genuinely believes that murdering half of all living beings is mercy, and he's so committed to this idea that he throws his favorite daughter off a cliff to make it happen. Let's pause on that. He kills Gamora, the child he raised, because he loves her, to get a rock that will let him commit universe-wide genocide. That's not complexity. That's just being a terrible person with a philosophy degree. The snap itself is horrifying when you think about it for more than 2 seconds. Billions of people just turn to dust. Mothers disintegrate in front of their children. Pilots vanish mid-flight, causing their planes to crash. Surgeons disappear in the middle of operations. The secondary deaths from the chaos alone would be astronomical. And then everyone acts like bringing them back 5 years later fixes everything, completely ignoring that the people who came back now exist in a world that moved on without them. Their spouses might have remarried. Their jobs are gone. Their children are now older than they are. The Falcon and Winter Soldier showed us that governments created an entire refugee crisis trying to handle the returned people. But mostly Marvel wants us to focus on the cool team-up moments instead. Nebula. If you want nightmare fuel, look no further than Nebula's childhood. Every time she lost a fight to Gamora during training, Thanos would surgically remove a piece of her body and replace it with machinery. She's not a cyborg by choice. She's a living reminder of child abuse and body horror. The movies show us this through exposition, but really think about what that means. A father figure systematically mutilating his daughter, piece by piece, year after year, as punishment for not being good enough. Nebula's whole body is a map of her trauma. Every cybernetic part represents a moment where she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, perfect enough, and she still seeks Thanos' approval, even while hating him, which is textbook abuse victim behavior. When she finally gets to kill a version of him in Endgame, it's cathartic, but it doesn't undo decades of torture. The fact that she finds a kind of peace with the Guardians is nice, but it doesn't change that her entire existence is a testament to how far parental abuse can go when you have unlimited power and zero empathy. Drax. Drax plays the funny man in the Guardians movies, the one who takes everything literally and says inappropriate things at the worst times. But we forget that his entire family was murdered by Ronan on Thanos' orders, and he watched it happen. His wife and daughter were killed in front of him, and his response was to become so obsessed with revenge that he lost touch with social norms entirely. That's not quirky character development. That's unprocessed grief and trauma manifesting as social dysfunction. The reason Drax doesn't understand metaphors isn't just for comedy. It's because after your family is slaughtered, your brain rewires itself to deal with only concrete, literal truths. Abstractions and metaphors require emotional bandwidth he doesn't have anymore. Every joke he makes about death, every time he casually mentions his murdered family, it's a coping mechanism. And the movies use his trauma as a punchline while occasionally remembering, oh yeah, this character is deeply broken inside. When he connects with Mantis about loneliness and loss, we get a glimpse of the massive grief he's carrying around every single day. So there you have it. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is full of colorful heroes punching bad guys, but underneath all that spectacle is enough trauma to keep therapists employed for decades. These movies sneak in some genuinely dark content between the quips and the action sequences, and most of the time we're too distracted by the next big CGI battle to process it. But that's what makes these characters compelling, right? They're not just superheroes, they're deeply damaged people trying to do good despite their pain, which somehow makes their victories mean more and their losses hit harder. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darkness lurking in your favorite Marvel movies, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about your favorite films. See you in the next video.